Hey there folks, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. I'm not sure how to gauge this week. It's one where on the surface it seemed like a fair bit happened, well, a lot for this time of year, but I'm just not all that convinced that outside of our new number one that I somehow predicted, and a mini album bomb from Roddy Ricch that I was a bit late in calculating, that much really happened here at all, especially heading into the deep freeze of the holiday season and early January. I guess we'll have to see long term, but in the meantime, well, our top 10 is certainly interesting. Taking a number one in a feat that feels like it's been decades in the making, Mariah Carey ascended to number one with All I Want for Christmas Is You, getting the sales surge that has to come with a well-timed discount, and she's got the new video on the way, along with dominance on streaming and holiday radio. As I said, it's only a matter of time, and Mariah, she got there. Which leaves Circles by Post Malone in a bit of an awkward position at number two. It's got better radio and good sales, but is nowhere close to the streaming traction to get any higher. And at this point of its run, I don't see it happening. Then riding a similar holiday wave, we've got Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree by Brenda Lee up to number 3. When it's got this kind of streaming plus holiday radio, I honestly should not be as surprised as I am. Also makes things a little bit awkward for Someone You Loved by Louis Capaldi stuck at number 4. Yeah, the radio's in free fall, but a slight sales boost will prop this up a little bit longer. Then gaining a spot on good radio and sales, we've got Good as Hell by Lizzo at number 5, and a similar slight boost for Roxanne by Arizona Zervas at number 6. Although in the latter case it's probably more due to streaming and some slower radio growth than outright sales. Now this actually pushes back Memories by Maroon 5 down to number 7, which kind of surprised me as I predicted this sort of sedate gunk would actually pick up traction in the holidays. But hey, a bad streaming week actually held this back despite its radio and sales. Then in one of the largest returning entries in Hot 100 history, but one that was sadly expected, Lucid Dreams by Juice WRLD returned at number 8, mostly on the back of enormous streaming and a burst of sales. Not the first time we'll talk about him here either, just strap in. But in much better news, Dance Monkey by Tones and I has finally broken into the top 10 at number 9. It's got traction across the board, folks. This song is gonna be huge in 2020. You've all been warned. And finally, creeping into the top 10, we've got A Holly Jolly Christmas by Burl Ives hitting number 10 on streaming and holiday radio. Hey, I guess we gotta get used to this sort of thing for the Hot 100 around this time of year, I guess? But on a different note are Losers and Dropouts, where, at least in the latter category, the biggest theme seems to be long-running 2019 hits finally making their overdue exit. Talk by Khalid, I Don't Care by Ed Sheeran and Justin Bieber, Baby by Lil Baby and DaBaby, Time by NF, and on a slightly better note, How Do You Sleep by Sam Smith. And I'd like to say something similar is happening for our losers here too. It's certainly how I might explain the collapse for Only Human by the Jonas Brothers to 44, On Chill by Wale featuring Jeremiah at 45, One Man Band by Old Dominion at 41, okay that sounds a little better, We Were by Keith Urban at 94, and the slightly more graceful exit of Beautiful People by Ed Sheeran featuring Khalid sliding down to 50. Then we got the sudden collapse of momentum for Vite by Bad Bunny at 75, Show Yourself by Idina Menzel and Evan Rachel Wood at 93, and Yellow Hearts by Ann Saunders at 95. But I'll say this right now, I'm much more annoyed at the collapse of both the new songs from The Weeknd. I mean, I can tolerate Heartless down at 17 after the number 1, but can we not let Blinding Lights fall down to 52? It's such a great song, deserving of real traction here, people. Come on! Anyway, might as well get to our returns, where, as I predicted, the late Juice WRLD saw several songs of his return thanks to streaming. They're not gonna last, and I can't say I really liked any of them, and I've already talked about Lucid Dreams, but for the moment, with Legends at 29, Robbery at 49, and Empty at 87, I get why they're here. Similar case for Watermelon Sugar by Harry Styles, getting a shot at energy at 92. It's probably gonna get higher next week. But I'll admit a little bit of surprise that Start With Me by Roddy Ricch and Gunna got a considerable revival at 58. And when you go to our gains, that album boost also translated to Tiptoe with A Boogie with the Hoodie at 73. Along that line, the late Juice WRLD also saw a boost with Ellie Goulding on Hate Me to 60, and for Bandit with Youngboy Never Broke Again to 12. And outside of that, the most we got was a slight slight rebound for Suicidal by YNW Melly to 74, and a holiday boost for Like It's Christmas by the Jonas Brothers to 61. I mean, I'm not that angry about that one, as I don't really expect it to last that long in the cultural memory. I'm just disappointed. Anyway, we got our new arrivals, and outside of the album bomb, there are some odd ones here taking advantage of the limited competition in this season. Starting off with number 100, Best on Earth by Russ and Bia.
Hey, and I know I've been around, but I swear you got the best on earth.
You know, it's funny. I keep hearing that Russ is operating in an entire different ecosystem of success, and it's just raking in the cash the charts just do not understand. And you know what? There are plenty of acts for which I know that's very much true. Look at Brockhampton. So it is kind of weird now seeing Russ on the Hot 100 these days, but hey, snapshot of a different world of success, it might be good. And then we get the squeak of bed springs, nursery rhyme pianos, spare percussion, and I'm encountered with the possibility of a Russ sex song with Bia, who sounds like she'd rather be anywhere else than on this song. I sympathize. But again, the problem here, it's Russ. Pussy singing like it's Run This Town, a song where, not unlike this track, it sounds like Rihanna wanted to be anywhere else, or how she wants to vlog their fuck session. But I think my larger issue is with Russ's flow. If you're gonna make a sex song that's trying to be sounding kind of raunchy, but a little sleeker, a little bit more sensual, maybe your cadence on your verse should feel a little better structured and not as misshapen as it is. I mean, let's be real. The only reason anyone outside of Russ's fan base knows that this is here is because Rihanna shouted it out, because Russ put her name in the song directly. I mean, it's favors exchanged for a mediocre song that hopefully won't last long. Next, number 98, Big Stepper by Roddy Ricch.
Murder, 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 keep my slugs, my nigga.
Okay, we got 3 Roddy Ricch songs here, and I'll admit that after the first singles he's rolled out, I didn't have the highest of expectations, and that's probably fair because I'm still left with the impression with this that we got an extended Young Thug impression, a lot of really tenuous rhyme structures that seem perpetually unstable, and content that's nowhere near as interesting as a lot of the production. Because like before, I do think the acoustics against the jittery patter, the thicker bass, and the dense hi-hats actually sound really good, but Roddy Ricch can barely ride the beat consistently, and the content is the same brand name flexing, killing people, drug abuse, and stacking money, and it's just not all that compelling or interestingly described. I mean, I've certainly heard worse, but will I remember this in a day or less? Probably not. Just saying. Number 97, Lord Above by Fat Joe and Dre, featuring Eminem and Mary J. Blige.
All I need is love.
So I actually did hear a bit of buzz about this song, unsurprisingly thanks to some passing references from Eminem's verse that compelled Nick Cannon to make one of the more humiliating diss records in recent years. And on a Fat Joe song of all things, a collaboration that I don't think I would have ever seen coming, and yet here we are. And as a whole, it's an odd mix. You can tell that even though Dre's verse is clunky and Fat Joe's verse isn't exceptional, and rather sloppily produced too in comparison with Eminem's wordplay, which again, probably some of the most focused and tightly woven he's been in some time, but he just sounds a little bit weird over a groove that's fusing that big, soulful, New York-inspired sample with a bunch of dense, rattling snares and a hook from Mary J. Blige, who probably fits the best here and sounds the best overall. It's just hard to avoid the feeling of culture clash with a song like this, but I also can't really deny that it works better than it should, and for what it's trying to do, it delivers. Good stuff, I don't mind it. Number 85, Bad Vibes Forever by XXXTENTACION featuring PnB Rock and Trippie Redd.
Can barely get control. Catch the vibe in me, get the feel in me, on me.
Now this, on the other hand, I thought we were done with cheap attempts to strip mine whatever's left from X, but apparently we're not even close, because over another cheap, sloppily produced guitar fragment and a few non-rhyming lines masquerading as a hook, Trippie Redd and PnB Rock try to string together some sort of love song. And at this point, what is there to even say to justify or explain this one way or the other? PnB Rock is trying to work an XXXTENTACION impression and somehow winds up being less interesting than usual, and Trippie Redd remains one of the most basic and uninteresting trap artists working right now, as he can barely form even the basics of a coherent idea. And when you're dealing with such underwhelming fragments forming what barely passes as a demo, the only thing my mind focuses on is how this only exists to wring a lot more cash off his memory. It's gross. Let's move on and forget this exists. Number 82, My Oh My by Camila Cabello featuring DaBaby.
He comes alive at midnight.
So I can't be the only one a little bit unnerved how Camila Cabello did not get the smash breakthrough with Romance beyond this song. I mean, I did predict she was in for some trouble, but the fact we only got one song is a little alarming. I didn't expect to be this right, especially when it's really only here because of DaBaby. Certainly not because it fits on the album, or is good. I mentioned this in my review, but the song feels crowbarred onto the project because they need to find a fresh hit somehow. So regardless of any thematic arc describing her relationship with Shawn Mendes, we get a cut of bad girl posturing with DaBaby with whom she's got no chemistry. It doesn't help that the production of the beat is a lot clearer and sharper than the auto-tune and cushion of reverb swamping out the mix of the bass guitar, which leads to a weirdly disjointed instrumental that doesn't obscure how much her squawking delivery on the pre-chorus and outro just sounds dreadful and awkwardly tinny to boot, even before the gang vocals slide in. So yeah, if she's counting on this to be the next big single, I mean, I expect to be proven wrong here, but she could be in some real trouble, because this is not good. Number 72, PETA by Roddy Ricch featuring Meek Mill.
Power. Now none of these niggas can see us. I'm rocking furs on first. I'm probably beefing with PETA.
Okay, second Roddy Ricch song, this time with Meek Mill with his punchline about beefing with PETA because he's wearing furs. Why do I think it's a sort of baited, non-essential controversy for which I don't think either of these guys are equipped to handle? Certainly not off of this production, with probably the ugliest off-key acoustic line I've heard from him, and a jumble of pan flutes that might add some color but don't coalesce at all, and a track where Meek Mill might not be interesting or sound like he's having any fun with all his money and women, but is at least a little more competent on this groove. That's the weird thing. When you juxtapose Roddy Ricch with better rappers, not only is his content just completely empty, he just can't sustain a consistent flow from line to line, where he doesn't allow any real momentum to properly materialize as all the flexing continues, and his flexing is still not that interesting. I'll say off of a cut like this, I put him above rote copies of Young Thug like Lil Baby and Gunna, and that he's got some charisma and slightly better delivery. But again, we're 2 songs in here, I'm still not hearing any incentive to check out that debut album. I'm just saying. It's not bad, but not great either. Number 59, Christmas Tree Farm by Taylor Swift. Honest question. Why is Taylor Swift releasing an original Christmas song at all? Especially with vintage-leaning cuts like Lover that are already kind of filling that role for her on the radio right now? Is she seeing Mariah's recent run and wanting to imitate that? Because it's way more likely she'd wind up putting something disposable like what the Jonas Brothers did last week or what Katy Perry did last year. Hell, I don't know if she even would rise to what Casey Musgraves has been doing with that TV special. So with all that established, look, okay, it's passable on the benefit of at least having a little bit more lyrical flavor with the rural setting, and Taylor Swift's got an eye for detail and she has a personality, both lyrically and using some slightly more interesting chord choices that still fit the vintage vibe. And yet it's the vibe that feels compromised when the production sounds as thin as it does here, with the cheap sleigh bells, a bouncy groove that's clearly cribbing from All I Want for Christmas Is You, a bridge that's trying to be soulful in a really weird way, and a theatrical chintziness that definitely reflects Taylor Swift producing this herself. It just feels like an oddly curious for Taylor Swift to make this. Apparently she had written this and it was assembled in 48 hours, and yeah, it shows. But I can at least hear something of an artistic soul in this beyond a cash-in. It's not bad. I don't know if it's gonna stick around, but it's harmless. Whatever. Number 47, The Box by Roddy Ricch.
Send all the bells out the box. I just hit a lick with the box. Had to put the stick in the box.
Okay, Roddy Ricch, one more chance here. Well, if we're looking for the song that might be as weird as a good Young Thug song, it might be this on production alone. I mean, sure, it's by the numbers percussion, but the ominous orchestral swell behind the vocal ee-oop in the melody, it kind of fits how many flows and melodies that Roddy Ricch will bend across with a decent bit of intensity in parts. It's certainly his best hook as he elongates words and bends into sharper verses. And yeah, the first verse might feel a little squeaky, but the second is actually a fair bit better, and his claim that he's a 2020 presidential candidate followed by placing a bounty on George Zimmerman, it's the first time he said something that's genuinely interesting or unique. Wonder how many people would vote on him on that platform alone. Now beyond that, gunplay, flexing, so nothing all that crazy interesting or compelling, but I do think of his 3 songs here, it's probably the best one, and if it sticks around, yeah, you know what? I'm fine with that. Number 35, Adore You by Harry Styles. So I mentioned this song a couple times and I reviewed Fine Line yesterday, and of Harry Styles' singles thus far, it is easily his best. Right to the gentle but angular groove, it's got a little bit more guitar accent and wiry presence. Yeah, I'm still all that fan about how his lead vocals are produced to sound as compressed and shrill as they do, especially opposite the more lush harmonies, and the watery guitar groove probably could have afforded a little bit more melodic development against some of the more textured percussion. It's why this sort of Michael McDonald vibe isn't really translating as well as the original article, beyond just Harry Styles not being nearly as smooth and soulful. But you know what? The exuberance of an otherwise straightforward love song does balance off the groove pretty well, even if I'd argue that Harry Styles has really put out better and more interesting songs from the last album that have better hooks, and I'd argue better production would probably make this considerably stronger, especially given the general weediness of so many of the pickups here. So yeah, it is still a good song, but I get the feeling it should be great. And again, this week, I am gonna call it the best, with Lord Above by Fat Joe, Dre, Eminem, and Mary J. Blige as the honorable mention that's very close behind. Worst of the week, okay, dishonorable mention is going to My Oh My by Camila Cabello featuring DaBaby, with the worst obviously being Bad Vibes Forever from the late XXXTENTACION featuring Trippie Redd and PnB Rock, where I have to hope the muted reception to this new posthumous release assumes that we're done with them, right? Next week though, hell, it's gonna be on Christmas Eve, and I'll have a fun scramble trying to get everything together, so let's hope it goes down pretty fast. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.